Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, hundreds of health workers will be lobbying Parliament, worried about deficits, worried about cuts, and worried about low morale in our health service. The government's chief medical officer, the government...
Order. Let the right honourable gentleman speak. Order.
Speaker ticking off the Labour side there.
Hearing about Labour cuts in our NHS. The government's chief medical officer has said evidence from within the NHS tells a consistent story for public health of poor morale, declining numbers, inadequate recruitment and budgets being raided to solve financial deficits. Was the chief medical officer speaking for the government?
Well, let me tell you what is actually happening within the National Health Service. There are 400,000 fewer people on waiting lists than in 1997. Waiting times for cataracts and heart operations are down. People now get their cancer treatment on time. There are 300,000 more staff in the NHS. And if he wants the best evidence of improvement in the National Health Service, someone said this morning, if you were to say to me, is the NHS better now than it was in 1997, I think there have been improvements. Who was that? The shadow health spokesman.
What about the chief medical officer who advises the government? As ever, he never answers the question. Let's hear from someone else in the NHS. The chairman of the British Medical Association says that this year has seen vitally needed healthcare professionals losing their jobs. He says he's dismayed by what he calls the incoherence of current government policies. After 9 years of a Labour government, did the Prime Minister ever think morale would be so low in the NHS?
There was, of course, the comprehensive report published on the health service by the Healthcare Commission just a few days ago, and this is what it said. There are real improvements to applaud and celebrate. Patients are seeing real improvements to healthcare services in England and Wales. They're waiting less time for treatments. There are now more doctors, more nurses and more healthcare professionals. Now, the fact of the matter is, yes, of course, there are changes in the National Health Service taking place, rightly, because there are more cases being done on a day-case basis. There's new technology that is shortening waiting times. There is specialist care being developed. There is more done in primary care settings now. All of this is part of necessary change. And his party, having first of all opposed all the investment in the National Health Service, now apparently are also opposing the reform. And the only way the National Health Service is going to improve is keep the money coming in, not cut it back, which is his policy, and make sure we make the reforms to have value for money.
The health service professionals aren't here protesting about our policies, they're protesting about his cuts. Now, if he won't listen to people within the health service, will he listen to his own health guru, Sir Derek Wanless? Derek Wanless told the Chancellor the money could have been better spent, and we've now got an account of how the conversation actually went. Sir Derek said to the Chancellor, your policies since 1997 have made it worse. There was then an uncomfortable silence. Brown was no longer interested in the conversation. Does that sound at all familiar to the Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, there is one issue, which is whether the National Health Service has got better since 1997 as a result of the investment and reform. Now even his own shadow health spokesman admits that it has. It's got better because we got the largest ever hospital building programme underway. It's got better because there are more staff in the National Health Service. It's got better because the very targets he wants to scrap are giving reduced waiting times and reduced waiting lists. But yes, it's true, there are real difficulties in the National Health Service. Of course there are. There are bound to be when we undergo a process of change. But he says they're protesting about our policy, not his. It's hardly surprising, I may say, when we look at what his policy is.
Tony Blair's looking to the Speaker, worried that he might intervene to stop this.
I'm just about to indicate why we wouldn't follow it.
And the Speaker gets to his feet.
Mr. Cameron.
For once, the Prime Minister admits there are real difficulties in the NHS. aren't the real failings in the health service down to bungled contracts, endless reorganisations and top-down targets? Aren't those the hallmarks of the Chancellor of the Exchequer?
The reason we have managed to get waiting times and waiting lists down, the reason why people are being treated for cancer far quicker, the reason why we've actually got 150,000 fewer deaths from heart disease since 1997 is precisely because we've laid down targets for minimum treatment. Now, if he is saying he's going to get rid of targets inside the National Health Service, that will mean that those patients at the moment that are guaranteed proper waiting times, proper treatment, that are guaranteed, for example, when they go to accident emergency departments, they can be seen quickly, they will no longer have those standards. Now, if that is his policy, then not merely is he committed to cutting the investment in the health service, but he's going to take away the very minimum standards that have delivered the improvements his own health spokesman admits to.
I know he doesn't want to talk about the Chancellor. He can't even mention his name, but let's just spend a moment on it. Let me put the question I put to him 3 weeks ago. Back in January, the Prime Minister said, "I'm absolutely happy that Gordon Brown will be my successor." Now, does the Prime Minister...
Order. Order. I let the right honourable gentleman away with that before, but this matter is not going to be belaboured because the Prime Minister is here to talk about business of the government. Order. Well, I'm giving a ruling here, and it's an important point. Order. It's about business of the government. Who will be the next leader of the Labour Party is for the Labour Party to talk about and decide. Order. Order.
MPs don't like this.
Order. 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 I'm giving the ruling. Ultimately, it may cause that it may be the case that it would turn out that that leader will become the Prime Minister. But I'm telling the right honourable gentleman, it's not a matter for the floor of the House. This Prime Minister, order, order. I tell the right honourable gentleman, this is a matter there matters. Don't. I say to the honourable gentleman, don't keep interrupting me, or I suspend this sitting, and then his leader won't be able to speak. I make it clear it's not a matter for the Prime Minister who's responsible for government business.
Mr. Speaker, are you honestly saying we cannot ask the Prime Minister of the country?
Order. Maybe we get some calmness. What I'm saying, and of course, anything I say from this chair is said honestly. And I tell the right honourable gentleman, who he has no right to ask on the floor of the House at Prime Minister's question time, who the Prime Minister is supporting for an office within the Labour Party. Order. Order. Order.
Perhaps I could just, with my last question, ask the Prime Minister who he'd like to see as the next Prime Minister of this country.
Order. 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 I'll allow that. That's in order. Prime Minister.
Well, I was simply going to say that a record... I am about to answer that a record that has delivered, as Chancellor, the lowest inflation, lowest unemployment, lowest interest rates in this country's history, that has managed the strongest growth of any major industrial economy, that as a result of that has delivered record investment in the National Health Service, is a rather better recommendation than having spent some time advising Norman Lamont on Black Wednesday.
And after those extraordinary exchanges, we're on to the next question. When the House has calmed down,